Good afternoon and welcome, friends. Today I'd like to share with you a little bit about why I think that the King of the North is the papacy. I'd like to share with you some thoughts here, some people I visit with on the streets. For instance, I was visiting with a Christian man here the other day, and many as you know that mainstream Christianity teaches that the Antichrist power, the 1,260 years, will actually be in the future. Now, we as Seventh-day Adventists, historical Seventh-day Adventists, believe that the 1260, that the papacy would rule, was in the past. But what I want to share with you is what happened with this man. He says, why can't the Antichrist be in the future? And then the thought came to me, yes, he's right, the Antichrist is in the future. It's in the past, the present, and the future. But here's, at least to my understanding. So we know that the papacy was in the past, and we know that it will come again to life in the future. So when Christendom says that the Antichrist will be in the future, they're right on that, but they're wrong with exactly with the 1260 and the amount of time period that it would rule for persecution. And this is where we would vary as Seventh-day Adventists to the rest of the Christian world. Now I want to share with you here, this is called the 1843 chart. The prophecies that were promoted by William Miller and his associates were put upon this chart. God had led William Miller to an understanding of these prophecies, and then a man by the name of Charles Fitch had put these on the chart, and it's called the 1843 chart. You'll notice here that the Antichrist power is shown here in the bottom of the chart, where it's got the 10-horned beast with the little horn coming up. We know that from prophetic history, the starting date of the papal rule was when the three horns were uprooted. The three horns are the three kingdoms that disagreed with the views of the Catholic Church. And so the Catholic Church at that point in time went on a rampage and killed these folks. Our next slide here, we're going to show you something. This comes from the 1843 chart. And what I want to share with you is at the bottom of that pic, you have the woman riding the beast, or the Roman Catholic Church and Rome. To the right, you have a Mohammedan or a Muslim on a horse. We're going to look to the left here. You're going to see underneath the year 606, it says, Rise of Mohammedanism. This power stood up not against the Prince of Princes, because it did not exist until the period of Revelation 9:1 in the star that fell. You see, William Miller and the Seventh-day Adventist pioneers taught that Islam was used as a scourge or a judgment against the Roman Catholic Church and what they were doing. Today, there's many within Seventh-day Adventism that are teaching that the Roman Catholic Church raised Islam. This chart shows specifically it did not. And I want to share with you a few other points, but we're going to share with you here a slide that shows the 1260-year time period. So as you look at this timeline here on the left, we've got the name Isa, which is the name for Jesus in Arabic. And then as we scroll to the right, you see the year 321, which is the time when Constantine changed the day of worship from the seventh-day Sabbath to Sunday. And then we have the rule, or the setting up, of the papal power in 538. And it ruled and reigned 1,260 years, or 3.5 prophetic years. The interesting note is when you look at the bottom half of this, you'll see the year 570. Look how close that 570 is to the year 538. 570 is key in prophetic history because that is when Muhammad was born. You see, Muhammad was born and then given visions into the Quran to speak against this power that was ruling of the day. The Quran was not to give a new religion per se, but it was to speak against the satanic power that was ruling. So here in Revelation chapter 9, we have the prophecy of the Crusades where the Roman Catholic Church is in power, and when it's slaughtering the true Christians, specifically the Lutherans and the Protestants and others, that's when God raised up Islam, and they were used as a judgment or a scourge against this apostate power. And we find that here in the fifth and sixth trumpet, or the first and second woe, describing the Arab Saracens and the Ottoman Turks. Now I want to share with you from Revelation chapter 9 as we look to our next slide. This comes from the 1850 chart, and you could see in the upper left-hand corner you see the 10-horned beast. In the right-hand side you see the Muslims or the Ottoman Turks. Today, those that are teaching that Islam was raised by the Catholicism, I want to show from Scripture that this is not true, friends. For instance, Roman Catholics believe in the Trinity. On the right hand, we see that Muslims believe in one God. Catholics believe in eating pork. Muslims believe in no pork. Catholics believe in drinking alcohol. Muslims do not drink alcohol. Catholics believe in bowing to images. Muslims don't believe in images. Catholics don't believe in the judgment that we would, and Muslims believe in the judgment. Catholicism teaches original sin. Islam teaches that there is no original sin. So when you look at these two religious powers, they're an exact opposite belief system. There is no idea at all that these powers are in unity or working together, or that Islam is submissive to Catholicism. If you turn in your Bibles, please, to Revelation chapter 9, I want to show with you why I hold to this view. In Revelation chapter 9, verse 4, it talks about these locusts. And what were these locusts to do? In Revelation chapter 9, verse 4, and it was commanded them, the locusts, that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. So they were to hurt the men who had not the seal of God in their foreheads. Revelation 9, verse 20 and 21 gives us a description of this power and people that these locusts or Muslims were to hurt. Revelation 9:20 says, "And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues or the locusts, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone, and of wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk." Verse 21, "Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts." You see, here's talking about the locusts or the Muslims hurting those who are worshiping devils and idols of gold and silver. And you may ask, well, who's given this command? The Bible tells us. In Revelation chapter 9, we're going to look at verse 13. It says, "And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates." So as if you look at this picture on the screen here, the sanctuary, at the bottom, we've got an arrow pointing to the four horns of the golden altar. You see, this command is coming from God to Jesus, to the angel, to the Muslims to go to war of those of the Catholic persuasion. So, in Joel chapter 2, the locusts are called God's army. So the Muslims are God's army coming against those of the Roman persuasion. Just to give you a few thoughts to show to you that Islam and the Quran is not Catholic, I want to show you some views here. This comes from Surah 4, verse 47 in the middle of your screen, and we're going to read the one in red. It says, "O ye people of the book, believe in what we have now revealed, confirming what was already with you, before we change the face and fame of some of you beyond all recognition and turn them hindwards, or curse them, as we curse the Sabbath breakers. For the decision of Allah or God must be carried out." Here the Quran says that Sabbath breakers will be punished, that it was the decision of Allah, and that they should be punished. Islam was brought up to bring punishment against those who were speaking against the truth and those who were involved in false worship. Another thing I want to share with you is that many tend to believe that Muslims venerate and worship the Virgin Mary. Here's a scripture that comes in Surah 4, 117 from the Quran. It says, they even worship female gods besides him. As a matter of fact, they only worship a rebellious devil. The Quran here is stating about the Catholics and worshiping the devil through the idea of worshiping the Virgin Mary. So there is in no correlation that Muslims are involved in Mary worship. Now, I'd like to share with you, my friends, some of the things here as to what was an eye-opener to me in looking at the issue of the King of the North and how to portray that. I came across a couple verses here a few years ago that really made a lot of sense to me. I'd like to share them with you. But before we do, I want to share with you, as we look to our screen, some thoughts here about Jesus and the Pope. You see, the Pope is the Antichrist power, the man of sin. When we read the Bible, we've got the woman arrayed in purple and scarlet. We've got the beast, we've got the man in sin, we got Babylon. All of these things are connected, you could say, as one group per se. So here we've got Jesus and we got the Pope. Jesus is called the Lamb. The Pope is the beast. Jesus forgives sins. The Pope claims to forgive sins. Jesus is the head of his church. The Pope claims to be the head of the church. Jesus' ministry was for 3.5 years. The papacy is ministered for 3.5 prophetic years, or 1,260 days. Jesus received his death on the cross. The Pope received a deadly wound in 1798. Jesus had a resurrection. The papacy is going to have a resurrection according to Daniel 11 verse 40 and Revelation 17. Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. The Pope is Lord of Sunday. Jesus is our high priest. The Pope claims to be the high priest. Jesus did not marry. The Pope does not marry, and we find in Daniel 11 verse 37 describing him that he desires not women. Jesus has the keys to hell and death. The Pope claims to have the keys to hell and death. So as we look at the verse here underneath, we see here Christ, or the Lamb. In Revelation 1:18 it says, I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of hell and death. Here Jesus has the keys to hell and death. But as we look in the upper right-hand corner of that slide, we see that the papacy, the Vatican Church, flags has the keys, and the Pope claims to what? To have the keys to hell and death. So here the Antichrist is mimicking. It's a copycat. It's looking just like Jesus. Now we're going to read again here at the bottom where it talks about the Antichrist. Excuse me. It says in Revelation 17:8, the beast that thou sawest was, is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wander, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. So here this beast, it was, it is not, and yet is. So it was, meaning it had life. It was not. It received its deadly wound, and then it's going to come back to life again. It's going to copy the life of Jesus, because Jesus was alive. He received a deadly wound on the cross, was dead, and then has a resurrection. But one thing I want to point out to you, friends, is this. When we think of the cross, that is the wonder of God's love for humanity, that he would cause his son to die that we may live. But here in Revelation 17:8, there's another group of people that wander. They're not wandering at the cross. They're wandering at what? It says here that they shall wander after the beast. So Jesus' people wander after him and his Father. And the papacy, these people that will rule the whole world, these people wander after who? They wander after the beast, because they believe it's like Jesus. I want to share with you something here. We're going to look again here at the slide. It says, Christ the Lamb. 1:18 says, I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore. Amen. And have the keys of hell and death. Now, Revelation 17:8 is the copycat of the Christ. It says, the beast that thou sawest was, is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wander, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. So as we look at this slide here, we can see, my friends, we see Jesus the Lamb. He has his death on the cross, and then he has a resurrection. And beneath that, we see the papacy, or the beast. It's different than a lamb, but it's a beast. It receives its deadly wound in 1798, and the papacy has a resurrection just like Jesus, but it's found in Daniel 11, verse 40. So just as Jesus ascended into the heavens, as he ascended up from the grave, I should say, the papacy will ascend from its grave. Because here in the Bible in Revelation 17:8 says it is not, or mean it received a deadly wound and a death, and then yet is. It's going to have a resurrection. It's going to ascend again. I want to share with you here, when you look at the screen, there are many within Seventh-day Adventism today that view that Turkey is the king of the north. I want to share with you why I believe, according to this scripture and so forth, that why it is not. So if you look at the screen there, we've got Jesus the Lamb receives his death and has a resurrection. According to the Bible, of what I see, the papacy receives its deadly wound and has a resurrection, Daniel 11:40. And to those of Seventh-day Adventists that believe it's Turkey, if you put Turkey in there, it received its deadly wound, or its death, you could say, on August 11th, 1840, which is a true statement. But those that hold to this view believe that Turkey will have a resurrection in Daniel 11, verse 45. You see, my friends, what I believe what this view is doing is teaching and taking that the Antichrist power is now Turkey, or the Muslims. When you visit Christianity today, they are all teaching that Islam is the Antichrist. They've given up the view that it's Catholicism. And this is where I believe that the devil is trying to get people confused, because he wants people to misconstrue between Catholicism and Islam and the position and role that each of them are in Bible prophecy. So I want to share with you in Revelation chapter 9, we're going to look at a little bit of the two-time prophecies. There's two-time prophecies in Revelation chapter 9, and they're found in verse 5 and verse 15. These two-time prophecies were understood by a man by the name of Josiah Litch, a Seventh-day Adventist pioneer. And Josiah Litch taught, as he went through these scriptures, he had come to believe that according to these scriptures, that something was going to happen to the Ottoman Turkish Empire in the year 1840. He later pinned that date to the exact day in which he concurred was August 11th, 1840. You'll see on the screen here how he came up with this. So there was a battle of Nicomedia in July 27th, 1299. That was the starting date of the 5 months, prophetic 5 months of when these people should be tormented. So if we look at the top of the screen, we've got 5 months. According to the biblical calendar, according to what God had designed, there is basically 30 days in a month. So you take 5 times 30 would be 150 years. So from 1299, and we add 150 years, we come to July 27th, 1449. Now there's another prophecy in Revelation 9:15 where it says an hour, a day, a month, and a year. And we've got the time written down there for you to understand, but an hour would have been 15 days in prophetic time. A month was 30 years, and a year was 360 years. So if we would add, and a day, I forgot a day equals a year. If you would add those up, you would come to 391 years, okay? And at the top of that, we've got the 15 days yet. So 391 years and 15 days. So if we take July 27th, 1449, we add the year 391 years, and it brings us to the year 1840. Now, in 1840, we've got July 27th, 1840, and we add 15 days. So we got July 27th, 28th, 29th, 30, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, which would bring us to August 11th, 1840. You see, God had worked this man's heart to understand this prophecy. This was the crucial part of the message that showed the rest of the world that the Millerites, the pioneers, had an understanding of Bible prophecy. So when they were sharing that this was going to happen in August 11th, 1840, it shared with many unbelievers that the truth that the Bible was true, and these people became believers. Not only did it do that, but it established the day for your principle, because we're talking the year 1840, just 4 years later, the pioneers are talking about the second coming of Jesus in 1844. And that's what gave the relevancy to the truth of these people, because they had just predicted August 11th, 1840, and now they're predicting the second coming. Now, in short, what I want to state with you is this. This prophecy in Revelation chapter 9 describing Othman and the Ottoman Empire showed that it would cease, that it would no longer be a reckoning power, a ruling power in this earth's history. And we're going to share a few other things here a bit later, but this empire was named after Othman. I want you to think of Babylon when you had Nebuchadnezzar. It was named after him, right? It is no longer in store. Why? Because Nebuchadnezzar is no longer alive. So it's the same thing here with Turkey. Turkey, Othman is no longer alive. It's no longer a reckoning power, but we'll see that as we continue, I believe. Here's an old chart that I found a while back, and this shows here the king of the north and the king of the south. Now, when you look at it, we know that you got the little boot there, you've got Italy, and you got the Vatican there. And the papacy moved its capital to Constantinople, or Istanbul, Turkey. But what's interesting about this map and what the pioneers taught was that whoever inhabited the land of Assyria was the king of the north. And whoever inhabited the land of Egypt was the king of the south. And the reason why was because Assyria was to the north of Jerusalem and Egypt was to the south. And what I want you to consider, my friends, is this. When we're talking Daniel chapter 11, these last verses, it is referring to everything within that chapter is describing literally, okay? I do believe that when Uriah Smith had made that comment, that's a literal prophecy, that is true. But all these views that people hold today that say that, the king of the north is Russia and it's atheism, and then atheism was down in Egypt, and you got to hold to what's north and what's south. You can't keep moving things around. And I want to share with you something that's not been heard of or talked about much, and that is this. The Seventh-day Adventist pioneers all taught in early history that the papacy, the Catholic Church, was the king of the north. They later changed their view. So Uriah Smith, James White, Jones, Haskell, Josiah Litch, they all taught that the king of the north was the papacy. Now, the majority of the pioneers changed their view that it was Turkey, and here's what they did. To my understanding of research, the pioneers used to teach at Daniel 11 to 39 referred to the king of the north as being the Pope. And then at 39 it ended, and that there's a gap, and what is yet to transpire in the future was verse 40 through 45. Now, what happened, to my understanding, was Uriah Smith and many of the other pioneers changed their view because Turkey was coming so-called in the news again. And so they wanted to make things fit to show that we're at the end of time. And so the view that they changed it to was they changed the Daniel 11, 40 through 44 is now in the past, and all that's left is verse 45. Whichever view that you hold to, I believe, you have to be true that there's a gap. And this gap that you have to consider, is this gap from 39 and onwards, or is it from 44 and onwards? And when you think of the writings of Ellen White, she talks about that the last movements will be rapid ones. Well, when you take the word movements, if you take the idea that it's Turkey, there's only one verse to happen. That's not a movements, that's movement. 40 through 45 would give, at least to my understanding, the base of the movements, that the last movements will be rapid ones. But what you have here, friends, is two views basically that are being used within Seventh-day Adventism today. Now, there's some variances. Many people are teaching that even parts of 40 and 41, 42, and so on have already been fulfilled. But I would suggest to you, friends, that we are at verse 39 and 40 through 45 is in the future. I want to share with you some thoughts as to why I've come to understand and believe at least what I'm saying. One, the pioneers originally taught the King of the North is the papacy. Smith, Haskell, Jones, they all changed their views. And I believe they changed their views because Turkey came in the news. Originally, the Seventh-day Adventist pioneers taught that in Daniel chapter 11, there was only two powers. What they did is they went back and changed. They changed verse 36 and 37, and they added in a third power to come up with their view. So here you could actually see in the writings of Uriah Smith where he talks about where he made the change where there was a misunderstanding, he thought, where he said the change was from the king to a king. So that's where he went from just describing the king of the north, which originally taught was the papacy, and he added a king. So in verse 36 and 37, before that he says it's the papacy, and then 36 and 37, he makes that out, I believe, as France. Okay? And he says that France doesn't desire women. But I want you to think, what did the devil do to Eve in the garden? He added one word and said, thou shalt not die, when the Bible said, thou shalt surely die. I'm suggesting to you, my friends, here, Uriah Smith made a big mistake, and he changed it from the king to a king. And that's where the switch made, because he had to go back and switch verses to come up with a view that they later held. And then we're going to look here at some of the screens. We're going to look at what William Miller says on these verses. And we're going to look at some slides here that show that Haskell held to both views, and it's found on the titles of his book. Now, the Ottoman Empire, in which people are teaching as the king of the north, it's ended. It is no longer the Ottoman Empire. It ended with Othman. And then when you look today, when we look at Turkey on August 11th, 1840, it surrendered to four great Christian powers. When we look at Turkey today, my friends, it is still surrendered to the Christian powers. And it is still, I shouldn't say still, but is part of the United Nations. This shows me, friends, that Turkey is not what many claim to be. I want to share something here from the book of Zechariah, and I apologize, I didn't get the verse on there. And this is referring to Jesus, and it says, now the comment that I want to make is this. When we're talking about the king of the north and the king of the south, the king referring to these verses refers to a literal person, a literal king. And I'll explain, because when we look at Zechariah, it says, and his feet, referring to Jesus, shall stand in that day upon Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem, on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof, towards the east, towards the west, and there shall be a very great valley. Half of the mountain shall remove towards what? Towards the north and towards the south. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains. For the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azel. Yea, ye shall flee, like as ye fled from an earthquake in the days of Uzziah, the king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. So this is Jesus. And it shall come to pass in that day that the light shall be clear, no dark. But it shall be one day which shall be known to the Lord, not day, nor night, but it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light. And it shall be in that day that the living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them towards the former sea, half of them towards the hinder sea. In summer and winter shall it be. And what I want to focus on here is next, and it says, and the Lord shall be what? King over all the earth. And in that day there shall be one Lord, and his name one. So here this verse stating that Jesus shall be king over all the earth, and we look at the idea of the king of the north and the king of the south. They want to rule. They want to be king of this earth. But when we look at the Antichrist, the king of the north power, it is impersonating Jesus. It is trying to rule in behalf, or I shouldn't be in behalf, but it's trying to rule instead of Jesus. Here we've got the 1850 chart, and I want to share some thoughts with you. So you look on the left-hand side, the upper left-hand corner, we've got the statue there, the Daniel 2 statue. The rise and falls of the kingdoms. You got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. When we look at Babylon, who was the king of Babylon? Nebuchadnezzar. He wanted to rule. He wanted to rule this whole earth. Daniel 8:20 on the left of your screen. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are what? Are kings. The kings of Media and Persia. Verse 21, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that's between his eyes is the first king. So here you've got the Medes and the Persians, which had kings. We talk about Greece. We know that the king was Alexander the Great and his 4 generals. And then in verse 22 it says, now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. You see, you've got Nebuchadnezzar, the kings of the Medes and the Persians. You've got the king of Greece, and now you've got the king of Rome, which would be the Pope. It's all referring to a literal person or a king that would rule. And normally, when you have a king, they not only rule over people, but a specific landmass. It has to rule over a specific landmass. And this is why I want to suggest to you that when we're talking about the deadly wound that healed by the papacy, the verses that we referred to earlier, the papacy is not healed yet. And why? Because if the papacy was healed, it would have more land than the Vatican. It would have complete rulership over these properties. And we don't see that yet. That's why I'm suggesting that verse 40 and onwards is yet future. With that being said, we're going to look at what William Miller had to say about the King of the North. It says, now when they shall fall, they shall be helped with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. This text agrees with one in Revelation 12:16. And the earth helped the woman, but many shall cleave to them. That is, many men of the world would cleave to them, and professedly would flatter the true people of God that they were friendly, at least to them. By these means Satan carried on his wars against the children of God. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end. Because it is yet for a time appointed. This verse shows that even Christians would be led into some of the errors of the papacy and would be tried and purged, even to the end of this image's beast reign, which time is appointed, as I have already shown to be times and a half, 1260 years, ending AD 1798. Here's what William Miller says in verse 36. And the king shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. The king here spoken of is the same as Daniel's little horn, which came up among the 10 horns. It is the same that blasphemed the God of heaven. It is mystical Babylon, Isaiah 14:12 through 15, Revelation 13, 5 and 6. The same Paul is described in his epistle in 2 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 9. The same image beast which we have been examining the history of. And one thing is evident. This beast will continue to the day that God pours out his indignation upon a guilty world in some form or other. You see here what William Miller said, that this beast will continue, or this beast, the king of the north, the Pope, Babylon, would continue until the day that God pours out his indignation upon a guilty world in some form or other. And then William Miller says this in verse 37. Neither shall he, the papacy, the Pope, regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. In this passage we have a plain description of the papacy. They do not worship the same gods the pagans did, their fathers, and their clergy are forbidden to marry. The Pope calls himself the vicegerent of God. Here, my friends, it's clear. William Miller taught that the king of the north in this verse 36 and 37 was the Pope and the papacy, connected with mystical Babylon. I want to read to you something from Ellen G. White describing these verses. It says, the work of wolves in sheep clothing. There will be even among us hirelings in wolves in sheep's clothing, who will persuade some of the flock of God to sacrifice unto other gods before the Lord. Youth who are not established, rooted, and grounded in the truth will be corrupted and drawn away by the blind leaders of the blind, the ungodly, the despisers that wander and perish, who despise who? The sovereignty of the Ancient of Days, and place on the throne a false god, a being altogether such as one as themselves. These agents will be in Satan's hands to corrupt the faith of the unwary. And this is 3 Selected Messages, 398. Here, Ellen White is stating that they will put upon their view a different God than the Ancient of Days. Here you see on the screen comes a writing from Stephen Haskell from his book, and I want to share with you where here he holds to two views in his book. If you will look with me to the top yellow in highlight, it says, truth had been proclaimed within her borders, but again the papacy rose up to do according to his will. It is in that country that verses 36 through 39 of chapter 11 were exactly fulfilled. So here, Haskell says 36 through 39 is referring to who? The papacy. Remember verse 39. That was Haskell's original view, that we were up to verse 39 with the papacy. 39, 39, 39. And now we find where he changes his other view. And as we read down there, and the second paragraph in it says Scott. It says, Scott is the life of Napoleon, speaking of France in the year 1793. Just a few years before the expiration of the allotted time, verse 36 says, the world for the first time heard an assembly of men. I guess I messed up there, I'm sorry. But what I wanted to bring out is you can find later within this book and other chapters of his writings that Haskell holds now, to, or at least to the last that I knew of. He changed his view from the papacy and then changed verse 36 and 37 to France and so forth. I want to share with you what many believe in Daniel 11:45 at the bottom. Now they say that that's Turkey. And I'm going to share with you why I believe that this verse is pointing and relating to the papacy. Daniel 11:45, and he, which would be the king of the north, shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So many teach that this is Turkey, and that none's going to help them. I'm going to share with you why I think this is the papacy. That same verse, let's take a look at Revelation 18:6 and what it's describing. Reward her even as she rewarded you. Double under her double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself, lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, I am no widow, and I shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine. And she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication, and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her, shall lament for her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning. And what are these people doing? Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. So Daniel 11:45 talks about the king of the north, that none shall help him. The king of the north is linked to the Vatican, Babylon, the man of sin, the Pope, and there will be no one to help. Why? Because they're going to watch the burning of her torment, or the papacy and the Pope, the king of the north. Here are some thoughts that I want to share with you as to why I believe that the king of the north cannot be Turkey. To those that hold to the view that Uriah Smith held, Haskell and Jones, they teach that in Daniel 11 verse 40 there was a triangular war. You see, in Daniel verse 11, it talks about the king of the north and the king of the south. They added a third player within that structure of a sentence to make it work for their view. Now, that triangular war was in the year 1798. These people are teaching that Daniel 11 verse 40 and onwards is an end-time event, happened at the very end of time, and that all that's left is verse 45. But we have a problem. We have a problem because this Daniel 11 verse 40, this triangular war, is actually happening before August 11th, 1840, when the Ottoman Empire would even cease. So you're taking an end-time event and placing it even before the Ottomans ceased. Not only that, you're placing that event before October 22nd, 1844. So we've got the first angel's message, the second angel's message, and the third angel's message. We are placing, if we hold that Daniel 11 is a triangular war and hold that that is France, we are placing that war before the start of the three angels' message, friends. That is a problem. Because Daniel 11, 40 through 45 is something to take place after 1844, not before. You cannot consider that an end-time event when you're placing it before October 22nd, 1844. So this is what I believe this view is doing. To hold that Turkey is the king of the north, it is bringing into view that Turkey is now the Antichrist power. Because the power that rules to the very end of the second coming is the papacy, not Turkey. I want to share some things from past history to show that history will be repeated again and how this is. It comes from Jeremiah 45. Jeremiah 49 verse 28. It says, concerning Kedar. Kedar is Ishmael's lineage. Okay? And concerning the kingdoms of Hazor, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, shall smite. Thus saith the Lord, referring to Nebuchadnezzar, go ye up to Kedar and spoil the men of the east. So here is a past prophecy where you've got Nebuchadnezzar, which is Babylon, coming against Kedar, which is Ishmael's lineage, and the children of the east are the Muslims' forefathers. Babylon came and put the Muslims' forefathers down. At the end of time, Babylon, spiritual Babylon, the king of the north, the papacy, is going to put down Kedar and Ishmael and the children of the east again. Turkey and Islam does not rule to the end. It is the papacy. Now, some thoughts concerning Daniel chapter 11. to those that are holding that the view that Turkey is the king of the north. Ellen White says that there will be a great revival amongst us through the studies of what? Daniel and Revelation. Daniel and Revelation are to be studied together. When we look at Daniel chapter 11, these last verses, people are not using Revelation, they're only using Daniel. When we look at these issues of Daniel chapter 11, the last verses, I believe, friends, we've got Ezekiel, we've got Isaiah, we've also got some other prophets, I can't remember, Joel. They're all giving us a description of Islam and Catholicism. And what's happening is many Seventh-day Adventist believers are taking and holding to views without looking at the other prophets. You see, all the prophets were giving us visions of what's coming in our time. And people are taking only Daniel. You need a second witness. If you're going to hold that Daniel 11, last verse is Turkey, then you need another proof read from another prophet to prove that. And they're not doing that. They're only using one prophet. I want to give you a suggestion for Daniel 11:36 and onwards in accordance with Revelation, the book of Revelation. Daniel 11:36, and the king, I'm going to suggest, is the Pope, the papacy, shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself, magnify himself above every god. He shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. Verse 37, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. This is referring to the Pope. He desires no women, okay? Now, I want to take a look here at verse 40. Now, I'm suggesting 40 and onwards is yet future. There's many in Adventism that are stated that 40's already happened. The pioneers taught, until they changed their view, that they were up at verse 40. When they changed their view to Turkey, that's when they said 40 through 44 is now fulfilled. I'm suggesting, friends, 40 and onwards is yet future. Verse 40, at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, or the king of the north. The king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, with many ships. He shall enter into the country, shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land. Many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom, Moab, and the children of Ammon. Now, you think of Daniel chapter 7. You got the little horn, you got the papacy, which we believe is the king of the north. In Daniel 11, there's three that are escaping out of his hand. Daniel 7, 3 were being conquered. Daniel 11, the last verses, 3 are escaping. Verse 42, he, the king of the north, shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries. The land of Egypt shall not escape. So I'm suggesting to you that this king is the Pope. He's a literal person, a literal man, and he's coming now to rule over land. Just like the Pope, when he uprooted the 3 horns, he gained control over that land mass by slaughter. In the end, the papacy is going to do the same thing again. It's going to gain control over lands. And it says here that he's got to gain control over Egypt. Why Egypt? I want you to think, my friends, today about Egypt. Today, people want to bring in atheism to Egypt. Who is the main people group in Egypt? It's not atheists. It's the Muslims. It's Islam. Islam is in the way of the papacy standing. Yes, there are imams. Yes, there are clerics. Yes, there are Muslims that you see on the news that are in willing submission. But brothers and sisters, I want you to think. You think that the Muslims are going to believe the Catholic doctrine when they will kill you over idols, when they will kill you for eating pork and drinking alcohol and believe in the Trinity? You think that Muslims are all going to buy into that and sit down? They are going to stand and give a fight. And these countries that we're talking about in Daniel 11 to be superseded by the papacy is Muslim run, Muslim people. Verse 43, but he, the king of the north, shall have what? Power over the treasures of gold and silver, over all precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at a step. So here it's stating that not only is it Egypt taken, but Libya and Ethiopia. You look at these countries again, it's full of Muslims. But notice what it says here. He, the king of the north, shall have power over what? Treasures of gold and silver. To me, that sounds like Revelation 13, buy and sell. No man can buy or sell save he who hath the mark of the beast. You see, Daniel and Revelation are dovetailed. They're going hand in hand. And the people that want to hold to the view that these verses are done, it doesn't hold water, friends. Because why? We haven't even, to those that hold the view that Turkey is the king of the north, I want you to consider. If Turkey was to go in to Israel tomorrow, and you say that is the end of probation. We've not had a Sunday law. We've not had the loud cry. We've not had persecution. We've had nothing that we're talking about end time events. We have not even had the United States of America yet enforcing the Sunday law. Let's read on. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, or the king of the north. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. This, I believe, the tidings is referring to the loud cry, my friends. The loud cry that Seventh Adventists are going to give. So you got the buy and sell and the loud cry happening simultaneously. Think of 1888, when you got Jones who went before the courts because they're wanting to enforce a Sunday law, the Blair Bill. At that same time period, Ellen White also talks about when you had the start of the latter rain. And I can't remember if she said the loud cry or the midnight cry, but at any rate, it was God, I shouldn't say any rate, but it was God working. It was God working. You have Satan working and you have God working. To end, I would like to state this to you, my friends. The papacy is the Antichrist. It will rise again and is known as the king of the north in Daniel 11:40 through 45. Daniel 11:40 through 45 is future, referring to the papacy. And at some other point, I'd like to share with you some things in regards to the pioneers and the papers of this, and look a little bit more at the king of the south and some other things. But may God bless you as you study, as you search to know and to understand. And I believe that the proof is relevant today, that the king of the north is the papacy, and I want you to consider these things. So may God be with you, and thank you.